I'm so delighted to have you all here. This exhibition is called We Are the Sky, and it features, in the advertising it will say more than 40 Pikes Peak region artists, but the reality is we're probably well over 60 artists who have participated in the work in this show at this point. Artists were invited to submit via an open public call for entries, and the call for entries asked artists to respond to some themes that are present in the sculptural works of Starr Kempf. So our big kinetic sculptures that surround the Ent Center for the Arts here. And some of those themes, kind of the three major themes that are present in the work, are themes around mental health, around building and expanding community, and around innovation, and how if art is at the center of all of these things, we know that our health is improved, we know that we are building better, stronger communities, and that we are thinking about things a little bit differently so that the world doesn't always have to be the way that it is, because artists and community are really great at thinking of new ways to think about things. So we're going to start here with K8E Orr Ashley Cornelius. Ashley is our laureate of the Pikes Peak region, and both well-established artists here in Colorado Springs, as are most of the artists in this exhibition. Hi. I'm not going to say too much more than that. I'm just going to kick this off, as we will with every artist who speaks throughout this Artist Talk series. For each of you, in 25 words or less, what is your artist statement?
Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Cornelius, my pronouns are she and her, and my artist statement is that I create poetry as a translator. So I take the human experience, as complex and nuanced and beautiful as it is, and translate that into the written word so that people can meet each other in curiosity, empathy, and joy, and a bridge to new perspectives.
That was so eloquent, and I have nothing prepared, but my name is K8E Orr. I care a lot about getting others engaged in the art. I think art is a pathway to healing, and so anybody that I can get involved in the arts and community, it just brings so much gratitude and gratefulness to my heart, and so I'm happy to be part of our unique art scene here in Colorado Springs, and to encourage others to get involved and do it as well.
All right, so this is our beautiful collaboration. This is called Aurora Atlas. And so we're going to be talking about sort of where this came from. I'm going to pass it to Katie to talk about this beautiful sculpture, but she created this. I wrote the poem, and then you'll see some of the lines of the poetry inscribed up above and below. So we really want folks to look up as you would look up into the night sky and explore. But Katie and I have been friends for 4 years. We met under a tree at a protest in Acacia Park. Very fitting for us. And truly ever since we've been artistic partners and best friends, and so it's really beautiful to be able to create art and to look at our experiences as a Black woman, as an Indigenous woman, and how our cultures understand the sky. So I'll turn it over to Katie first to give more context.
So I probably did too much, but I'm going to go ahead and read what I wrote anyway. So I just want to say we're so extremely grateful and excited to be invited into this space and to be showing here. Storytelling, especially in this piece, really braids together the visual and the narrative, and so it's something that I'm just so profoundly proud of. The night sky is reflective of the beauty and the landscape of the human experience. We look to it for direction and meaning, and we are comforted by the glow of the exploding supernova that contains the celestial stories and symbols. The most beautiful thing about the night sky is that every culture has its own storytelling and interpretations that surround her. We are all tied to the night sky. I feel this project is a testimony to the harmony that you can create when diverse perspectives get to come together. There's an echo of disconnection for many Black and Indigenous people of color, and in many ways our culture has designed it that way on purpose. But the sky holds our legacy, our hopes, and our dreams. The braided constellations remind us of who we are and where we come from and how connected we are to everything. The stars can lead us home, and I hope our piece Aurora Atlas embodies this message. The show has been a beautiful acknowledgement of amazing local artist Starr Kempf, who has inspired us in the cultivation of collaboration. Collaborating is one of the most beautiful things that we can do. Collaboration ties our souls together through artistic movement and connection, and in our case, to the night sky. I'm sure there have been many times our ancestors looked at the night sky and found solace. There were moments when the sky was the only thing that we could depend on. It is where our ancestors come from and where they go. It's how we speak and our connection to the past, today, and tomorrow. To know this generation is lucky enough to be guarded by the stars and become dreamers, I truly believe is something our ancestors have all collaborated on. Ashley and I met under a tree and immediately connected through nature. Our souls speak the same language, connection, that can rest in each other's arms and inspire us to dream simultaneously. We were brought together for a reason that is deep and profound, and we're both so thankful to have cultivated a friendship under the stars. Together, we have been determined to fight while acknowledging rest and the deep beauty beneath the sky of Colorado Springs. My father used to tell me when the black hawk and the red hawk fly together is when the work truly gets done and the world gets to come together. Ashley coming into my life has been so profound, and I'm so happy we get to soar together through the sky. I also want to acknowledge Starr Kempf. When I was younger, my mom would take me to see his sculptures, and sometimes he'd be in his garage working, and I'd get to go in there and talk to him and see him work. And it was just, seeing his freedom in that space was amazing for me as an artist. We're so grateful to have the space to tell our story. A huge thank you to Joy Armstrong and all the GOCA staff. Thank you so very much. I feel like the stars knew who I was before I did. And many times through my artistic life, I've wished on the stars, and they've always told me to continue. And now, Ashley?
Just so honored and treasured to be here. And this really was a collaboration of creating the poem and then giving that to Katie and then playing off of each other. And so along with the sculpture, we have this poem that I'm gonna read for you all, and I'll sort of give more context afterwards, but this poem is called We Are the Stars. Only those who have looked at the night sky and found liberation hanging on the stars knows what it is to dream while wide awake. Leave bodies tethered to earth and get lost in interstellar frameworks of ancestral divinity. Imagine fields of cinnamon, gardens of empathy and sunsets, casting poetry on the shadow of the sky. Dream with abandon. Forget there was ever a thought to diminish the capacity of our fantasies. Travel between anchor stars to connect the dots of warriors, goddesses, mothers, and heroes, depicted in celestial history. Read the indigenous stories painted in the braided constellations. Invert the sky and run along the mapped routes to freedom dreamed about for generations. Trace the brailled stars along your feet as each step carries you to self-emancipation. Smile with your eyes closed and your heart towards heaven. Become a small thing with a huge resonance in the presence of the expanse. Exhale a crystallized breath and release part of yourself to float upwards and form a new star cluster of your brilliance. When we look at the sky, we are not learning about our legacy. We are remembering it. Remembering languages lying dormant in our throats, waiting for a moment of awe so grand only our mother tongue has the words to respond. Remembering generations of women buried in the dark of the universe, still illuminating our paths. Remembering the self-evident truths that we are exquisitely created and capable of grand and phenomenal acts of self-honoring. Remembering we are the sky, we are the stars, we are the dreamers. Thank you. last bit, just sharing where this poem came from. I did a residency in Lake City, Colorado, which is a designated dark zone. So you can see the Milky Way and the stars in the sky, and I was lying by the lake, and we were all watching the stars and the shooting stars, and I realized this is the same sky that my ancestors, who were a part of enslavement, looked at. And I said, if they saw all of this, there is no way that they thought this was all that they were meant for. Of course they ran away. Of course there was revolution. Of course there was resistance. If you look at the sky and see all of that, you know you are meant for so much more than your current situation. So this inspired this work and the way in which our cultures understand the sky. And what I'll say to close is that I invite you all later today is to look up, to look at the sky, to remember your legacy, the stars, the dreamers, and just remember how deeply connected and ancestral we are in the stars. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. It's such an honor to have you be part of this exhibition. Okay, it is now my honor to introduce Jonathan Dankenbring. All of these artists, it's such a treasure to call them my friends, whether I've known them for a period of time or just met them through the context of this exhibition. Jonathan and I met during our work together at the Fine Arts Center at Colorado College, and I'm just delighted to see his work here at Goga. And so, Jonathan, in 25 words or less.
Oh boy. Thank you, Joy. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. First of all, it's really exciting to work with you in a different way. It's a very different relationship. So, 25 words or less. Anybody that knows me knows that it's going to be very difficult. My studio practice, in general, I am obsessed, one might say, with how we form ideology in our everyday life, right? So from when we're very, very tiny to when we die. Why do we believe what we believe? And in conjunction with that, how do the things that we make, buy, idolize sometimes, reflect those beliefs, right? So it's a pretty common story throughout the history of time of art, right? So that's kind of what encompasses my studio practice.
Yeah.
What else do you want me to say?
Well, I mean, it's a great overview of your studio practice. Could you share a little bit about maybe what piqued your interest with the call for entries for this particular exhibition? Like, what kind of connection did you feel?
Yeah, so this call for entry actually came up at a perfect time within the work that I was making. For over 10 years now, I've been making a series of works that are based on mirrors and reflection and what those surfaces can do. And so when this call for entry came up, I was literally in the middle of already making these. So read into that what you will, if you believe in such things. Yeah, and it was immediate. It was like, oh, I have to enter this, of course. I mean, there was literally no like, oh, maybe I'll put something else in or something like that. It was like, nope, this is what it has to be. So, yeah. As a side note, of course, I moved here in 2015. I, of course, did not know Starr, but interestingly enough, it was, I think, the first piece of art that I saw in town when I got here, and immediately thought, ooh, somebody that makes aluminum things, because normally I make most of my work out of aluminum. So I was fascinated instantly. Unfortunately, never got to meet him.
Can you speak a little bit to you having just mentioned that you often work in aluminum, but this is a bit of a departure, not entirely a departure. But can you talk a little bit about the materials that you use in your work and why you choose the things that you do?
Yeah. materials are kind of everything in my practice. So I started out as a painter, then kind of started moving into installation work, very hyper site-specific installation work, and then I started making sculpture. As soon as I started making sculpture, and even really when I was making installations, I realized that, you know, materials have a history of their own. You know, paintings are not just paintings. When you're making paintings, you're dealing with the whole history of painting. The same goes for sculpture. Really anything that we make, right? So what I always say over and over and over again, and people who know me probably get tired of hearing me say it, materials have meaning. And we need to stop ignoring them. So in this instance, the only material in particular that maybe seems a little out of place in this body of work is the use of tar. The use of tar in my work started actually in like 2001 and has been a stand-in for the use of paint for me for a very long time. As you can tell, fascinated by the color black. And I just wasn't, when I was making actual sort of paintings at that time, the material itself was not enough. Black paint was just, it didn't have enough feeling, it didn't have enough baggage with it for me. And then I started using tar. Just as a quick side note, Joy knows this story. I started using tar from a conversation that I had overheard while going to the neurology clinic with my father, who passed away of brain cancer when I was in high school. And the neurologist asked him a series of questions. One of those questions was, when you're getting ready to have a seizure, do you smell anything? Do you hear anything before you have one, right? As a sort of strange phenomenon, or almost a precursor. And my father replied, no, I don't really remember anything or smell anything. And so my father asked him, why are you asking me this? And he said, well, the most common thing that people report before they have a seizure or some sort of out-of-body experience is smelling tar, or what they describe as smelling tar. So overhearing this conversation has stuck with me my whole life. Some might say haunted me. And yeah, so that's how the tar comes into play. It's being used as a mask. It's used for all of those connotations and what it might imply before a drastic state of change in one's life or consciousness.
I can keep asking questions.
Joy and I can do this all day long.
Yeah,
So.
we could talk for
Our studio
hours
visit was
about
like
it,
3
but
hours.
Do you all have any questions for Jonathan? Because I will say that there are works in this exhibition that people will feel are maybe more accessible than others. And I am a big fan of Jonathan's work. However, I don't think it is out as beyond understanding that it's not always immediately accessible.
Yeah.
That it is very intellectual, that it is very precise in terms of why you choose the things that you do. So before we, and let me just make sure, I'm not checking my watch to be, because I'm bored, please. Nobody, I just want to make sure that we have plenty of time for everyone. So maybe a last question is, for art viewers who may be struggling to find a point of connection to your work, what is something that you hope that people may come away from, or where is that point of connection for you that you hope people might find when they spend time with the work?
Yeah, so I personally don't want to make work that is necessarily easily accessible in the traditional sense. I don't go out of my way to make it inaccessible, but I'm interested in sort of the aura of the work, and I'm quoting myself here, which seems weird, but the biggest compliment that I've ever gotten about my work is somebody said that they saw it 8 years previously and decided to email me and said, all they said was, this work is still haunting me, I don't know what to make of it. And that's truly the best compliment I could ever get. I'm not interested in fast, quick, one-liner stuff. That stuff's fine. I even enjoy it sometimes myself. But I'm interested in work that a lot of my work ends up in this weird dichotomy. Simultaneously, I don't want my name to be associated with this work at all. I don't care about my name recognition whatsoever. I care about what it does, how it affects people, how maybe it doesn't affect people, maybe it makes them angry. I have multiple faculty members in grad school tell me straight to my face that my work makes them very, very angry. That is a valid way of viewing art. I don't know why we think that art has to make us happy. It's okay to be angry because of a piece of art. Because, to me, that reflects life more evenly, and maybe a little more honestly. It's not always about beauty. Granted, I obviously use what some people might call beauty in my work, but I'm doing that on purpose. I'm poking at you to say, hey, what is that weird, beautiful thing? But why is it slightly off, or why does it feel weird, right? Yeah.
Thank you, John. Yeah. Any questions from you all for Jonathan?
Kevin.
Will you say what you create is a symptom of the things you think about? And can you tell us what this piece means to you in regards to the material used?
So in regards to the material used, these pieces, when they're in the studio and sort of the idealized settings that are probably not group shows, my work really struggles in group shows, is that they actually reflect into one another. And the lighting actually reflects the light back into other ones. So you become sort of entranced and centered in this infinite loop. There's a long history in different cultures throughout the world about sort of the power of mirrors. So when I make this body of work, it relates to the rest of my work in the sense that because the rest of my work is so heavy mentally on me, most of it is about conflict, war, things of that nature. Sometimes you feel the need to escape, and these pieces for me are playing with the idea of, can I build a space to escape to a new dimension where maybe those things don't exist.
What a beautiful way to end to talk about this piece. Thank you for asking me.
So excited to introduce Annie Pieper and Jacqueline Moulton. This piece is, and I shouldn't speak for all of the artists in the show. Is it fair to say this is your first collaboration, or have you been working together a long time?
Yes, I have never collaborated with another artist, at least not to this extent. And when I asked Jacqueline, I felt like it was like asking someone to the prom. Yeah. I really like your work.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I don't know what the romantic equivalent, the platonic romantic equivalent of an art partnership is, but there's a lot of that happening here that we've seen so far. So, Friends.
So we're dating now.
Is it Facebook official?
Yeah.
In 25 words or less
Ah.
for each of you, please share your artist statement.
Okay. Counting words, okay? I think these pieces for me is about the really complex but generative duality between our really deep need to be grounded and our deep need for ascension, for moodiness, for ethereality, for mercuriality, for change, for movement. But that movement is mercy when it's paired with also our need to feel our feet firmly on the ground.
Very good.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was maybe 30 words.
Well, I don't have anything more to add, really.
Same.
I'm gonna take a different approach
Yeah.
to the artist statement thing, though, to say that I found out about this show first, and it started out as a much simpler idea. Simply put, just a tribute to another artist. And in my own work, I'm interested in what I would call like a secular iconography. So I thought of this image as a response to Starr Kempf, but then when Joy took on the show and we had that first meeting, I could tell that she wanted so much more for this show, and I don't know, an icon is something that normally sort of stands alone and has its own gravity and magnetism, and I felt like really moved by the challenge to open up my own really like insular idea, and involved this wild lady with her just expansive just expression. So that was way more than 25.
It was 26.
Yeah.
But a great lead-in to you know speak more to the work and its evolution and maybe your shared process.
Okay, so I grew up in Colorado Springs, and therefore I was sort of born a Starr Kempf fan. I think local people who are of a certain age, you just sort of always knew about this like magical work. I really hated Colorado Springs though, and I couldn't wait to leave because I thought like you can't be a real artist here, and everyone's so close-minded. And so I lived in a lot of places, and the last place I lived before here was New Orleans, and Hurricane Katrina happened, and my parents still lived here and still had my bedroom, and it was sort of an obvious place to alight. And I couldn't believe what Colorado Springs had become, even by 2005, and it's still becoming, and it's such an inspiring place to me, and I'm like so lucky that I got to come back. But you know, going back to the concept of a storm and the sort of dread and knowing of its coming, the just complete chaos that ensues, I think about it all the time, and it's been almost, 18 years now? I was really excited with the idea of the storm itself being the subject matter. I work a lot with metal leaf and reflection, like Jonathan was talking about. I like the idea of a mirror in the center of a piece, allowing the viewer to become part of the subject matter. So even this like cold, brittle material can have this like warm, just conversation and connection with the person looking at it. And back to the storm theme, I think that I mentioned dread, but there's also this amazing thing that people do in times of crisis where they rely on each other, they help each other, they band together, they flee together. People really helped us when we first moved here, and then we got the chance to help other people, and I just never been part of an experience like that. And when I think about how the sky itself can be so mundane, it's just always there, but then with this like tremendous potential to just redirect your whole life, I was just really delighted to think about all of those things in connection with the goal of this show.
Do you want to talk more?
No, thank you.
Wait, please talk more.
I just love what you said about icons. That's such a, and how they tend to be so isolary. Is that a word? Yes, thank you. So isolary. It's so insular. So one-on-one, you communing with the divine. And so opening up the idea of icon. Even opening up, like the pieces we just looked at, opening up the idea even of reflection, right? That it becomes less about me as my singular self and me as a multiplicity, me as many, you as many, reflections reflecting in and amongst themselves. And I think all the subject matter has this really strange something that is nothing and nothing that is something, like the sky. It's such a palpable thing, and yet you can't sort of take hold of it. Same thing like a reflection, right? It's like myself, I see it. It's a thing I'm engaged with, and yet I can't sort of take hold of it. Maybe again, it's that play between what grounds me and what allows me to ascend. And we're always sort of stuck in between. Like how you so beautifully and simply put, right? Looking up is, and yet that play between looking up and looking down becomes this, that's a lineage itself. It's a directionality that connects me to a whole multitude. Yeah. But I think it's funny things that reflect, because even like icons, it's like, you know, when you're trying to like read the signs, but then everything is reflecting you back to you. And you sort of really are looking for a way out of yourself in a way. And I'm always stuck in between that of my prayer, like I'm praying, but nothing's ascending because I am a reflection of myself within myself. It's like I become an icon and we can't worship ourselves, so we get stuck. So sort of wind and weather is something that radically unroots us from that iconicness of ourselves. Whew. I don't know if any of that made sense. I made some of that up as I went, so someone take this from me or I'll...
So Jacqueline wrote a book of poetry that accompanies even this accompaniment. So I think you should read.
Oh, I forgot. Oh.
Yes, thank you, Annie. I was going to say, if we can't all be listening to Jacqueline's beautiful performance recitation of the poem associated with this piece, which is available on the headphones there.
Oh yeah,
But
which is really nice.
But we have the gift of the artist here with us. Here, just hold this one.
I can hold it. This will just be a 45-minute reading. Just kidding. It was the summer of ceilings, but what I needed was an open sky. I am landlocked now, and I dream of the dark, moody clouds that live by cold and quiet seas. I become dark, moody, cold, quiet, mercurial. It's a cold summer for you, you say. Meanwhile, I sweat out regret and rage at all the things I promised I would get right this time. Perhaps I've been reading the signs in the skies all wrong all along. Your voice reaches into the deepest marrow of me and carves me into the arch of a cathedral. I become all space. I become all acoustic emptiness filled with your voice. I become holy, whole, a church of sound, a church of the sound of you. Thank you.
Any urgent questions for Annie or Jacqueline? Or Annie and Jacqueline? Yes, Kate.
When you were setting up your display, did you think of how iconic the shadow was going to be?
No. No, but what a treat, right? I was like, oh, it looks like rib cages to me. Sort of like dancing rib cages. And this is where Annie is such a deeply thoughtful person, and I just kind of flutter around. But Annie always thinks about light and reflection and all of those classic things you're supposed to think of in art. So Annie thinks of these things.
I had no idea what you were gonna make, though.
Same.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our final artist who will be speaking with us this afternoon is Michelle Winchell. Some of you may know Michelle from previous appearances here at the Ent Center for the Arts at the Fine Arts Center, and currently as the Executive Director of Downtown Ventures. So please support our public art program, County Colleges Press, among other things. So Michelle,
Yeah.
in 25 words or less. Maybe these should have gotten short. Michelle, in 15 words or less.
2 words or less.
One word.
1 word.
What word defines you as an artist? Or 25 of them, or whatever.
Someone is going to count and tell me if I know. So I'm really fascinated by our relationship to language, written language, the aesthetics of written language, and technology, and how those things sort of inform each other and evolve over time. So I'll be doing a little happening in October at the closing reception. We had a few technical difficulties with campus bureaucracy, so it didn't happen at the opening, which is why I have pictures to show you.
Shocker, but please. Well, you'll be getting a little bit of a preview.
Yeah. So
And
October
5th.
Yeah. October 5th, we'll do it.
Yeah, it'll be.
And I have
it'll be a-
an activity for the group at the end, if that's
Fantastic.
okay. So I thought I would kind of speed run through. I tend to sort of dump a lot of information in my brain, make a big mess, and then pare it down to what seems like it needs to be there. So I thought I'd kind of speed run through some of the things that got stuck in my brain that led me down this pathway.
Sounds great.
So I grew up loving to read books and having a real connection to storytelling and how that allows you to inhabit someone else's lived experience and is this powerful tool, as we've heard from some of other poets here today already, for connection and empathy and shared experience. And then in college, I did study design and printmaking, and then stumbled my way into book arts and simultaneously worked at the Rare Book Library on campus. So this sparked this fascination with typography and how letter forms and their aesthetics evolved over time, and our kind of relationship to those, and how meaning is embedded in the actual visual forms of the letters themselves. So I eventually did the grad school thing and went down this pathway of sort of like, how are these activities valued over time? So this is the Gutenberg Bible. By the way, Gutenberg was not the first to do movable type. Our Asian friends were there first, both Korean and Chinese. It didn't take off because they have an ideographic writing system, so when you have thousands of pieces, you can see why that's unwieldy. But once it hit the alphabet, people were like, yes, we led this technology. And so you see Gutenberg like imitating handwritten scribal books with this first type in the Bible. And then printing spreads really quickly to northern Italy, and this book on the right is from Aldus Manutius's press in Venice. And they're starting to reprint all these Latin classics. And so when they're looking at what aesthetic form for these letters should we use, they go to Trajan's column and they're saying, oh, of course these Latin texts should be set in letters from the Roman Empire, not in this sort of like black letter that we see with the Bible. Well, this is an era where there wasn't a lowercase that matched those column inscriptions. They were all only in uppercase, so that was invented that time. And this is I'm just nerding out a little bit on a few of these examples because it's really interesting to me how we don't even think about that, like how our alphabet became standardized through our relationship with this technology and the aesthetic decision that someone made that was like, oh yeah, all of our Latin texts, those definitely should be in these Roman capitals. And then a little bit later, you have William Morris reacting to the Industrial Revolution and kind of trying to go back to this handmade aesthetic and finding human dignity and connection in crafted, thoughtfully made goods. And he has a press called the Kelmscott Press. And because he's kind of has this romanticized, idealistic thing in his head, he's like, well, of course the book should look like those handwritten scribe books. And so that's what his press actually produces. And he gives this lecture to these Bookbinders Association, like in all seriousness, just saying like, we all should go back to black letter. That is clearly the way to go. So I just find this fascinating as we kind of, these forms represent different things to different people in different times. And I sort of got started down this pathway of being fascinated by this because I'm a letterpress printer and I heard people in the letterpress community talking about hands that type as slow, as meditative, as this antidote to our current form of technology. And it's hilarious because if you go to source documents when printing was spreading around Europe, people were like, oh, these terrible technology of letterpress, it's killing the soul of books. And so I just find it fascinating how we have these cycles with new technology and new information of how our relationship changes them. Anyway, I will stop going about that. And then I kind of, in grad school, started doing more collaborative projects. This was a poetry chapbook that Roske was a faculty member at the university I was at, and I did this run of 500 chapbooks for his press. It was a really cool collaboration. Started playing around with sort of sculptural forms of letters. So these are crayons that are cast from wood type as a gift for TEDx Boulder. And then this was a show in Chicago, these like sculptural modular type forms that you can kind of read and they shift as you walk around them. More modular type forms in a workshop I taught here in Colorado Springs. And then I got to this place where I was really curious about this idea of consumption and how we consume text. Like, what if that was literal? Like, what if we literally ate the words? So I did this pop-up project called Eat Your Words that was, I interviewed friends and asked them to give me things that they said that they regretted. And then I baked and molded all of these cookies and chocolates. And the pop-up was a banquet table full of everyone's regrets that we communally consumed. And I would like to point out, this was one of my friends, the woman who I'm sorry was her regret. And I think that resonated with a lot of people. And it was really fascinating to me because this was this entirely kind of new direction for me to see how people responded. And it was so playful and fun. And people changed some letters around as some letters got eaten. And it was just this like pretty delightful event. And I loved observing how people connected with each other's experience, even though these were kind of maybe things that people remembered as like, oh man, that was a cringe moment for me. But people connected around them, and I think it made them feel like they weren't alone in those experiences. And then I did a second iteration of this at the show in Chicago. And then as I was kind of thinking about what the next iteration of this was, I wanted to include more emotional cues, but keep that element of people connecting to each other's experiences. So I came up with this idea for a typographic bakery, and I called it Fleuron and Finial, some kind of like typography nerd language there. But I baked 700 letters and prepared them for the event, and then created this bakery counter in the gallery, and filled the cases initially with messages from some of the previous iterations, so there would be something there. because I was really interested in, again, people connecting to someone else's experience in text and not just getting their own message back. So people would come up to the counter, they would select someone else's text, and they would sort of purchase it by filling out an order form with their own so that it would regenerate itself. And then I would take a break and typeset some of the messages, replenish the cases, and this would kind of flow through the whole event. So this is what I will be doing in October, and I'm delighted to do it here because I have not gotten to do this in town, and I also have many shared experiences with some of you who spoke already. I grew up in Colorado Springs, moved away for a number of years, lived other places, moved back in 2017, and most of my work these days is as an arts administrator, which I love. I love bringing people together around projects and ideas, but I'm thankful to Joy for including me in this and getting to do this particular project here. And I think, yeah, those are all the things.
There's a thing.
I
I get really excited about the thing.
Yeah, I brought order forms if people want to fill them out, and then we'll have something to start us off. Ooh, yeah.
So yes, please complete your order form if you'd like. And that will help our bakery get started on October 5th. Any questions for Michelle? Ashley.
Yeah, is there a font, I don't even know if I'm saying it right, but is there a font that speaks to you? Like if you could align yourself with a specific type of typography, is there something that is like, this is me?
Comic Sans.
So I really love families that are called humanist, from the humanist line of typography, which is just things that kind of show something, the motion of the hand. So they're typically based on calligraphy of some sort. So Whitney is one that this foundry called Heffler and Farrah Jones produces. And I just like those because you kind of get into the modernist type that gets really geometric, and it has this crisp, clean feeling, but it kind of loses a little personality to me. So I like something that has still the motion of the hand and a hand-drawn letter discernible in it, that I feel connected to that.
I have a question while we're doing that consulting. Have you created your own font as an artist?
Yeah, so when I was first kind of starting to be interested in typography history, and I worked at this rare book library, the oldest book in the library was from 1472, and I made a digitized version of it, and I had no clue what I was doing. But I was really interested again in that translation between formats, and if I look at it now, I'm like, oh, that's really not a great interpretation. But I learned a lot more later about some of the things that you do when you create a digital typeface, and I've translated some historic wood types and kind of interpreted those and made those into things. I've not published them, they're just sort of things I use for my own projects.
Oh, yes.
Just for fun, what is your favorite letter?
I mean, I do like an M. It starts my name. I just find it's fun to write. And an ampersand. I really like writing an ampersand too.
Deborah Thornton of Imagination Celebration and this Creative Exchange Project. I'm directing it to you, but please everyone introduce yourselves. 25 words or less. What is your artist statement?
This was collaboration upon collaboration upon collaboration. So it's hard to have an artist statement. Pat Music, brilliant Pat Music, Colorado artist, called me and said, did you see the call for entry for We Are the Sky? And asked if I wanted to do it with the Afghan women that are part of our program. And of course, that very concept of We Are the Sky, just like we were talking about earlier, that shared blue sky is something that we all are under. And so what we did, instead of an artist statement, sorry Joy, was to set up goals for this, our intentions for this, was to shine a light on the beautiful women, and I'm going to point to some beautiful women that are here from Afghanistan, and the beauty of the country and the beauty of the culture, so that we could have some sense of that, because in this area, especially because we're the Pikes Peak region, and we have a lot of military bases, a lot of people associate Afghanistan just with a war zone. And we wanted you to see the beauty and brilliance of these families and these women that are now part of our community here. We also wanted you to have a sense of the hardship and the challenges. We have never asked them their stories, and I ask you not to ask them their stories, because those are hard. But I want you to trust me, they have been through trauma and hardship that lasts through today. This week is the anniversary of the Black Day of the Taliban taking over the country. So it has been a particularly hard week. But we want you to also get a little bit of the sense. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute so you can hear the voices. So part of what we wanted you to experience is some of their experience, what it's like coming into a new space. So we wanted you to come into, they came from one space to our space. So we wanted you to come into this, we wanted to create a space for you to have an experience and be surrounded by words that you don't understand. What they're speaking about are their hopes and dreams. And so that's part of the process we've engaged in with them. We started in October working with the women. And so this is a collaboration of 25 Afghan women, 15 Colorado women, artists, Pat Music, Mary O'Mealy and Kim Sayers Newland, and me, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
She just did.
Tell us about yourself as an artist.
I usually respond to objects and experiences, and very much interested in design, and I've done installations and collaborative projects before, and I started working with Creative Exchange last spring, and because of my background, immediately was roped into helping, gladly so, to collaborating with Pat and Deb and Mary and everyone else on this.
Oh, I have to talk.
Yeah.
I got roped in, and I'm happy I did. I get emotional because of the stories, the outcome. But I'd like to say, it doesn't smell like fermented indigo, it smells like clove. It was a much easier smell to go into every day.
And we should mention that a lot of the hopes were.
Yeah. Okay, so that's part of the challenge with this is there are a lot of metaphors and symbols that are woven into this installation. And part of our process was that each week we convene the Afghan women, which means volunteers pick them up and bring them with their children to us, because we don't want them having to take the bus system. And we are in a big circle. We are very much, Creative Exchange is a partnership of 3 different organizations: Imagination Celebration, Diversified Consulting, and Interchange Works, because we know that the creative process is about healing. And so we convene these women, we bring them together in a circle, and we learn. It's an exchange. It's not just us teaching them how to be here. They are teaching us as well. So I'm going to teach you one word right away: Tashakkur. Tashakkur. Tashakkur means thank you. So, Tashakkur. So each week we would ask them questions. What's your favorite color? What's your favorite flower? What's your favorite smell? What's your favorite spice to cook with? What's your favorite bird? When we asked the one about the birds, we were told that the dove was one of their favorite. There were several women that said dove. Well, because this is about mental health and wellness, Crystal Bliss-Lardy is part of she's a performing artist and is part of our group, and she would have them learning new practices about how to breathe and how to move and how to feel their sense of self. And so the second time we did it, she said, okay, we're going to make a sound. And it's like this, so I want you to do this. And she went, ooh. and they started laughing. They did it, but they started laughing. And one of them said, "Oh, it feels good to laugh." And that went into our hearts. And then recently, we had a day where I just asked them, "What's your favorite word?" And one of our volunteers, as we got halfway around the circle, said, "Wednesday is my favorite word because it's my favorite day of the week because it's when I get to be with all of you." And so what we've created with the Afghan women and the Colorado volunteers is a community. And her saying that, right, as soon as she said it, she burst into tears. So we have laughed together, and that made us all cry together. And when I told Pat Music that story, she researched it and found out there is a laughing dove in Afghanistan. Does not exist in this country. But its closest kin is the mourning dove, which does exist in our country. So that's part of the continuum that these women are on, is that sense of joy, finding joy, at the same time they're dealing with grieving and mourning. And so Mary O'Mealy created mourning doves and laughing doves that are in this installation, watching over it. The saying on here that Pat Music did in calligraphy is Salam Alaikum, peace be upon you. So the doves have multiple meanings in that respect. So what we knew is that we wanted to give this sense of the landscape and how there are places in Afghanistan that look just like Colorado. You would think you were in Colorado. And so a common theme among us women are scarves. And I have to say, I also love the word synchronicity. And so the fact that Meghan is doing this mountainscape at the entrance is reflected in here. This Afghan rug has indigo dye. This is a 100-year-old piece right here. Indigo dye, madder, and cochineal is part of what makes that up. But part of the concept of this landscape is also the interweaving of our lives together and our support system. And like you were talking about with the mountainscape, as we're creating the copper structure for this to go on, Kim says, "That's not Pikes Peak. That does not look like Pikes Peak." So she made Pikes Peak. So the concept is that you come into this space and we're welcoming these women from the Afghan mountains. These are scarves made by the women. Into the inner sanctum here, right under Pikes Peak. And so the enamel pieces by Pat Music are taking what you heard in the voices, are taking some of their hopes and dreams, and actually they're on the enamel pieces hanging. But I also want you to see this is a traditional clove Afghan tassel. And so the women made these, each in their own way, so you'll see a lot of variety of them. That was another way that the women have their own expression into this. They were part of informing it, they were part of bringing the structure to it, and they're part of the creation. And I handed out the paper so it tells you a little bit more, and we welcome you to be part of this at any point. Because as we know, our friendships with them has really enriched our lives. So I invite you also to come into this space when it's not full of people, and really have a chance to listen to their voices and absorb it and smell the spices and read all of the thoughts of their hopes and dreams that you'll also understand.
So our first artist today is Meghan Wilbar. My very, very brief, yes, so someone gonna clap? Yes, clap. I'm not even really gonna give much of an introduction here, other than I was introduced to Meghan and Meghan's work probably 10 or 12 years ago now. I first knew Meghan as a painter, but have really fallen in love with Meghan's work in more of this realm as a studio practice of using paper as a medium, collaged landscapes, but Meghan will talk a little bit more about that. So to kick us off, I asked every artist to be thinking before they arrived here in 25 words or less
approximately, I'm not counting. What is your artist statement?
I had actually forgotten that you could ask that. So, I think my artist statement really is about looking at the landscape and kind of breaking it down into shapes and kind of exploring those kind of quiet moments that are in the landscape and kind of finding that is kind of what I do.
And I'll just say before we move on, this is a pretty casual experience. So please, if you have questions that arise along the way for any of our artists, feel free to ask. But how did you come to this particular project in response to the call for entries?
Okay, so when I first saw the proposal, I've done workshops with people over the years, and I've always found it kind of interesting how people can look at the same landscape and experience the same landscape, but in completely different ways and different ways of seeing and being. And so I had kind of proposed a way of kind of restraining people in a way of using my materials and coming together and doing that. And it was Joy that thought, let's make it like 10 times bigger than I have ever done before, and let's all do one, which has been new and kind of interesting for me. It's kind of, I think as artists, it's an interesting way of kind of letting go of yourself a little bit to invite people in and kind of respond to what they do, and change the way that I kind of see it too. So it's been a challenge and a lot of faith on your part to say, go ahead, put a panel up there, and we don't know what it looks like, and we may never know what the final one looks like. So it changes all the time.
Who can identify this landscape? Would anyone like to gesture toward this landscape? And one of the things I think is really special is that Meghan has not only taken inspiration from identifiable features in our landscape, but very literally, if you were to turn and look out these windows, that this exact landscape is what is reflected in the artwork.
Yeah, and when I had first come, I did a visit in maybe March, and in my brain it was, and I think because as humans, your memory maybe saves as a photograph instead of what you actually see. So I had assumed that it would go from here to here because that's the way I'm looking at it. But I can't figure out how to get it on there. So it was nice. Students that helped me install it really helped me figure out, no, just because I thought it would go that way, do it so that it makes sense so that people can know. So I kind of broke it down by window panels. Mm-hmm. So there's really 2 panels per each panel, but it changes every time you get further away. So, and also I've never done drawings before looking over my shoulder and relying more on the memory. I've always, kind of come from that school of measuring and kind of being, accurate in space, and you just can't do that because when you come to this point, Pikes Peak is now there, so you're either doing this, which changes your whole way of looking. So that was fun. That was a fun challenge. Yes.
So the panels were in place when you created this?
Yes, so the first day that I came on the install day, I put the 4 panels up and then started working on it.
So on location. And how did you choose your colors?
So I normally work in kind of a monochromatic field just because I had originally started doing that so that I could do the drawings that translated to paintings. And I never wanted to copy what my colors were because I wanted to just have fun when I was painting. So I wanted the drawings to kind of be like a key to how things line up in space. So sometimes, the white is something that's coming closer to you, or kind of building that paper so that I remember how things lay in space, so that when I paint it, I can just do whatever I want and not have to think too hard. But I think translating it to other people, it was interesting on Family Day. I think people often associate like a landscape with a particular color, or feel, the color represents something where I hadn't, because I had greens and other colors here, and blacks and reds, and people gravitated more towards the actual color than what I would, which I thought was really interesting.
I find it interesting. From my house, I don't have the identical view, but a similar view of the peak. And what it evokes in me is that I've been living in Colorado Springs for 45 years. I look at the peak every day, and every day it looks different. So what I'm seeing, for instance, the white isn't always there, but I see grayish colors. So on rainy days or dark days, it's grayish. And that is very interesting to me, and also how the clouds are different every day. So it's sort of moving and alive for me.
Yeah, and I worked on it for multiple days. So I think there was that moment of, it does change every time you look at it.
Exactly.
And every hour it's something that's just different and kind of nice to notice.
Yeah.
Your comment when you said that's what people were gravitating toward, the colors, it kind of surprised you. Were you getting some input from people when you were doing this?
Yeah, so they were putting it on there, and so to kind of respond to what they did, because sometimes you get so locked into how you do certain things or how you see something. So having somebody else kind of put that on there took the pressure off of me, and so, okay, I can start using. And so because people had done kind of the reds and blacks over there, I made the blacks in the front, because it opened up my way of seeing that maybe that's okay to do too.
So it's a community project, so to speak.
Yeah,
well, that's exciting. I'm sorry I didn't make the opening. I wasn't aware. This makes it even more amazing.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff on here that people have added to. So it's been fun to watch grow.
Yeah. It's been here and open to public participation since June 24th. Was that the Family Day kind of when we started? I think that was the date. It was something in June. Yeah, so we're coming up on having had 2 months of community members and other visitors to the Ent Center being able to view and respond in their own ways, which has been really special.
Well, that is.
And I apologize, I'm not being rude looking at my watch, I just don't want to break You alluded to it, but before we move on, Megan, I think your process is so interesting. You talked about translating this into a painting, but could you share a little bit more detail about your process of creating the sketch, essentially, the study?
Yeah, so I mean, it's been kind of an evolution. So I previously was doing more just black and white drawings so that I could take that back to the studio. And there was a time where, because I was working in gouache and I didn't like the black had become gray, so I put a piece of paper on top of it. And I thought, well, that's a genius move. So it kind of evolved into kind of being able to use the paper as just whole blocks of form so that I could see more of the movement of the landscape and less what each individual thing was. So, because I think there is a natural tendency of when you're outside drawing, it's so overwhelming that it's hard to kind of narrow down what it is that you're interested in and not to get to draw around things. And so being able to use kind of this paper with a pencil and kind of try to figure out to keep it loose and also kind of keep the full structure in there. And I work in my car a lot, so I can kind of go on site and just keep a box of paper with me and work on it when I can.
Plein air paper collage.
Yeah.
Or car air, I'm not exactly sure what. Thank you. Or maybe have one final question. Yes, John.
Megan, your other work that I've seen is created on the dashboard of your car. You're driving through the countryside, you pull over, and tell me if I get this wrong, but I think this is it. And then you start tearing paper right there at the dashboard. Is that correct?
Yeah, I glue it right there.
So you're looking through glass, a frame.
Yes.
It's a framed landscape. You're also, I didn't realize it until today, that you were working through the glass and the frames.
Yeah, and the only difference was I got so used to looking at it from the dash that I don't even look out the side most of the time. I position my car directly to make it the easiest possible. So this was kind of a nice way to force me to move maybe a little bit more.
When did you discover this modality for yourself? It's amazing.
You know, it's been maybe 6 or 7 years of kind of doing it that way and building. And it was nice. I had a frame shop that gave me all the materials. So yeah, and part of the reason that I started using that board was I was working as an art handler in New York, and so they were reframing stuff, and I was just hoarding all of the stuff that they didn't want anymore. So
Artists.
Yeah.
The original dumpster divers. I'm so sorry. I would love to keep talking with Megan. We need to move on to our next project. Sky sail, which you will see above your heads, if you will. And the wonderful artists who have put this project together, Naomi and Mel and Melanie, I'll let them all introduce themselves in a little more detail, but starting with, who would like to start? 25 words? 25 words or less. I'd love to hear from all of you. But what is your artist statement?
So I often work collaboratively, and in a pretty improvisational way, both with the things I do by myself as well as with other people. And I'm kind of a recent full-time person here and have been into indigo dyeing and stuff. And so invited these two to collaborate with me and a bunch of people in the community. This is way more than 25 words. So then we did a whole series of free workshops in the area, and over 80 people participated in dyeing and sewing this piece together. And if you see some of my other work, you'll recognize some similarities to kind of draping and bunching of things. But I like to think about environmental impact and immersive qualities of the work that I make.
I did. I probably will too. I'm sorry. So I'm Mel Williams.
Please speak up.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, I
I'll
can
do that.
actually turn this up as well.
No, I'm like a
Okay.
choir talker,
All
but
right.
I can project. So I'm an artist and educator. I live in Colorado Springs. I work at Fly Pig Farm in Manitou Springs, teaching materials development is the short version. I run a dye garden and workshops at the farm, and most of my process is engaged around how do we make the materials for art making. I spend more time making materials than completing projects, but that's where I'm at right now. That's what I'm excited about. That means pigments, dyes, reuse, and recycle of paper and fiber and so forth. And so that is kind of how the three of us got super excited about each other's work.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk. You can talk for yourself.
I'm sorry, I'm just not really comfortable talking to crowds. But my name is Melanie, and I am from Manitou Springs, and I am a fabric dyer. I work both with synthetic and natural dyes, and I run a lot of things. I have a bunch of programs, but the most successful program I have is the Blue Hands program, which is we run the indigo vats, and you
can come and dye your items in our indigo vats. So we do some we have festivals, we have clubs. The festivals are open to 25 to 30 people, and we teach you easy shibori techniques, and you come and you dye in our vats. And then the clubs are a little bit more intimate, where you get to really learn a specific shibori technique, and then really get to practice it and dye in our indigo vat.
Can you define shibari?
Shibori is it's kind of the official tie dyer. It's started in Japan, and it's mechanical resist, where you take string or rubber bands, and back in the day I'm sure it was just string, and you wrap it or you tie it or you sew it, and it creates a pattern on the fabric. So it started, I don't know if it started in Japan or if it started in India, but it started in the East.
I was also going to add that I am I'll be the fall semester Fibers Fellow at Colorado College. So, come and visit.
Could you share with us a little bit more about how the idea for this came together in response to the call?
So, thinking, I mentioned that I'm kind of an improv and collaboration person, and so the idea of the call for having collaborative work was really, it went ding for me. And so then I really thought about, well, how can I, as a newish person to the area, really get to know more of the community here and get involved. And so these two really, Mel and Melanie, really helped with that. But it was just really wonderful to have workshops in different places around Manitou and Colorado Springs and meet a whole bunch of new people. And everyone was really, it's really, I think I'm going off topic, but as far as I think it's really important, and one of the ways to build community and to build wellness and build community and get together is to do things with your hands. And when you can make something relatively quickly and do things that you've never maybe tried before, it brings up lots of different conversations. And there's such a long history, both kind of torrid and gross and also beautiful, about indigo, particularly, coming to the US. And so in some ways, I could conceptually connect that with the idea of the sail and this sort of cloud over your head and the pulling of things, and all of the materials were dyed by a lot of different people. Plus there's a lot of donated jeans and other things in here too. So Mel was wondering if anyone knew how many butts there were in the piece. I haven't counted. But, the humor is also really important too. And so I think to do improvisational and collaborative stuff, you have to have a sense of humor and playfulness as well, especially when we're kind of, in some ways, inherently talking about really difficult and political and social and things kind of embedded in this, whether you really think about it or not.
Yeah, I want to add to that I think it's easy to see a piece of work in a gallery space, and you can kind of know intellectually about the history of textiles or dyeing, etc. But we found over and over again, every time we have a workshop where people show up and they start dyeing fabric, that the sort of visceral reaction is oh, this is really labor intensive, and that gives me empathy for people who do it, and the history, it is automatic embodied learning. And that is part of the reason why the humor matters so much. but it's not like we're trying to like lay it on thick, like, oh, let's talk about the politics of this. It definitely comes up naturally every time we dye and work with fibers with other people.
Question? How do you get the indigo color? What is the process of that you do that?
Yeah, so in a basic sense, indigo is a plant, and you use the leaves. And the forms that we used were a powdered form. Some we used natural, and some we used actually a pre-reduced, made-up version, because it's fast when we're doing really mobile things. But we mostly, I like to use natural indigo. But there's a variety of different techniques. You can, I think, Melanie, you're doing a fresh leaf indigo vat
at the farm.
at Flying Pig Farm coming up sometime before too long.
And they all produce a different blue.
Yeah, so there's a different
blues
range.
in this, I mean, other than the denim, obviously, but all the different blues are from the different indigo vats. One being made with iron, one being made with iron, one being made with hydrosulfite, and one being the pre-reduced, which is a synthetic, but it's a quicker vat, and it's an easier production vat. Some are easier for production, some are easier for hobbyists.
There's lots of chemistry.
Yeah, there's lots of
It's
chemistry.
kind of magical.
It is magical.
Okay. Would it be possible, standing here, could you look at some of these and say that one's that type of indigo?
Yeah.
Would you just point out to us?
Actually,
I would
so
love to
these
see the
light
differences.
blue ones, like this light blue one right here, that's gonna be your iron.
Yep.
Okay. That's your iron. The really, really dark blue ones,
Like this one.
like that
Yeah.
one. Yeah, like this one right here, that's gonna be your pre-reduced.
Pre-reduced, yep.
And then the mid-grade, like this one right here, or this one on the end right here with the kind of spider webby thing, that's gonna be your hydrosulfite.
So that-
Thank
that's
you.
a natural.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
You said it comes from a plant.
Yes.
So how does it get from the plant? What concretely happens
Oh,
with this plant?
it's a kind of regrowth process.
Oh.
The leaves turn blue when they decay.
Yes.
So like if a single leaf from an indigo plant, if they're green leaves, and when they fall, even off the plant, they immediately start to turn blue. Oxygenation, the process of oxygenation, so like the plant is decaying and oxygen is interacting with the plant, turns it blue. And it's a very special property that only 2 or 3 like kinds of plants on the globe have. And the basic version is that we are trying to harness and stall the decaying process and then apply it to fabric. And then let that process finish once we put it on the fabric. So when we say pre-reduce, what we're doing is removing the oxygen from the liquid so that it can't decay until we add something to it.
But does it come out then as a powder? Do you have to mush it up to make it a powder?
The way that we use it, yes. The super old-fashioned version is that these vats, these like huge vats of indigo are permanent and you just tend to them. But they can be dehydrated and shipped across the world.
Like a fine wine? I said like a fine wine, you have to have.
Yes, indeed.
You take like huge things of leaves and you just put them in a big cauldron-like thing and you just let it ferment. And it smells awesome. Makes your studio smell great too. Your whole family's happy.
So, earlier, one of you mentioned that this has political overtones or aspects to it.
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that?
So back in the day, the way that indigo came here was through the slave trade. There was a young woman who, her father passed away, and she was like 16 and was a plantation owner. I think they were growing coffee. But didn't she?
Tobacco. They were growing tobacco.
Tobacco, something. They were growing something.
Her name was Elizabeth Pinckney.
Right, thank you. And she, so instead of growing tobacco, she brought indigo.
And she wasn't the only one, but
No.
she's one of the well-documented ones through her letters and stuff.
Yeah, and then there was also, was that you who said the way that they would punish the slaves was to make them ferment the indigo because it smells so bad? So that's how they would punish them. You have to go do the indigo.
But at the time, this was in the late 1600s and into the 1700s, it was basically like blue gold. It was basically, it was so expensive, it was called blue gold, I think, something gold, you know, so it was very, very wealthy. And it was a different blue and a deeper blue than madder, M-A-D-D-E-R, or, yeah, that was in England and stuff. And woad, sorry, yeah.
Woad was the blue.
Woad, yeah.
Woad was the blue that Europe used.
Or over
Yeah. Woad was the blue. They really like this topic.
It's just so interesting. I don't want to.
So, are we done? I can go on.
I know.
I think maybe this is an indication we need a lecture on the history of indigo.
I
mean, really, right?
I'm working on getting a grant to expand into the Colorado Springs area, and the first place we'll expand into is the Fine Arts Center. That's what I'm hoping to do, a blue hands or a blue hands club at the Fine Arts Center. I just put the grant in. So yes.
But also,
but I mean, 2025, I'm working on it.
You got to beef with Goka? Picking a fight about location of workshop?
No, 3 places. No,
we would love that.
So, yeah.
It was a very exciting family day project. We did a first family day with Megan's work and with the indigo dye, and just so much fun. So thank you so much. I wish we had more time with all of us. The one thing I'll mention before we move on to our next project is you had brought up the notion of collaboratory, which in the original call for entries, in the complete title of the exhibition, I referred to this as a Goka collaboratory. So kind of that portmanteau of collaboration and laboratory, and encouraging artists to think collaboratively but also experimentally. And I think that this work is among the most literal examples of what happens in terms of chemical processes and how we explore creation of art. I'm looking at Heather O'Class, who's another artist here, you know, but all of the scientific processes that need to come together in order to make many of these artworks happen. So thank you. A newer addition to the community, which has been so exciting for me as someone who's been in this arts community for a long time, is to meet artists who have been here a long time and I just haven't met yet, but also to meet and welcome some artists who are newer to our community. Darya's been here about 3 years. And so in 25 words or less, how would you describe your artist statement?
My subject is usually climate change, and I work in the intersection of art, science, and technology, collaborating with scientists a lot, or with specific scientific processes, to engage in conversation about climate change, in either it's through some references or actual socio-economic impact of climate change or impact on nature. So I think that summarizes it.
That was beautiful.
Great. I literally thought about this just now.
So yeah, thinking also about chemical processes here. Could you, since we are just coming off of talking about indigo and dye, could you share a little bit about the scientific processes, and then we'll get maybe a little more into the content and concept.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm actually so glad to see the indigo, because I did a workshop at Oxford Garden Foundation and it was incredible. They actually have a grown indigo there, and we did the old school type process, which is very smelly. So so this was interesting just to like listening to you and to 3 of you and having this memory and actually smell itself too. The process of sanitizing, sure, a lot of people are familiar with. It's basically an alternative photo process, and it's considered a non-toxic because the chemicals you use, when you combine them together, they don't produce any toxicity. You can actually basically release them into the water streams, and because they completely inert. Basically what happens is you apply, it was discovered a while ago, like I think in the end of the 19th century, I think so. But there's two parts. First part is you create an emulsion, and it's very unstable. Without 3-4 hours, it's no good. Usually you use it within 30 minutes. And so you cover the paper, you can do the fabric too, you can do all kind of different, like, glass, tiles, whatever you want. And then you let this paper sit for a couple, 40 minutes. I did a bunch of different experiments. So the paper dries out, then you put it into the sun, and what you can do, you can put either objects, which you can usually see in Anna Atkins' work, where she did seaweed, and let it be in the sun, depending what's the day, the cloudy conditions. It's between 7 minutes and could be up to whatever. So the sun exposes this emulsion. So then you take the piece and you run it under regular water. And of course, things I found out, like pH makes a difference, of course. And other different little tiny chemical things in the water can actually change dramatically the exposure. So, and it exposes blue. The water exposes is like deep, like not even deep blue, kind of closer to, I think, that's what the color you would look into, or that one. And then you can use further processes like adding it to the bath of vinegar, so it makes it more teal. You can see in some of these kind of like slightly tealer. And you can also bleach it, and it turns kind of this beautiful golden brown, and then you can re-expose it again, so I did it multiple times over and over, and you get the variations of the color. And you can also put it in the bath of hydrogen peroxide, and it makes it really, really dark. Like there's like this. This is hydrogen peroxide. And there's all these other different chemicals you can use, and also natural plants to actually give it different tints, like you can give it a pinkish tint or other tints. I purchased the book, and towards the end when I was finishing this project, and I'm glad I did that, because that will open a huge can of worms for me, because I was like, oh my god, if I did it from the beginning, I will never finish it. Because there was so much information, and of course, like, again, chemistry, basic knowledge, I guess, and lots of trials and errors, some exposure. Of course, we hire here in the altitude, and I don't know, there's like all these different, I created multiples of this. Multiples and multiples and multiples over, some of them bleached and over, and it was not every, they were all different, like the color. So I think this kind of summarizes the process.
Could you then now share a little bit about the content and the concept and what we're seeing?
So basically the project is actually an extension of something that I started during pandemic. We were in Buffalo, kind of stuck there, so nothing you can do, you could just go do hiking, walking around. So I was collecting pieces, just sort of this nature's artifacts that, I would collect maybe one thing during one hike. That would be it. And then I arrange them and I will scan them through the scanner, right? So I get this like really beautiful kind of like still lifes of nature artifacts that we kind of never really pay attention when we walk around. So, I mean, I don't know, I pay attention, but it's like something like, a piece of leaf, right? So we have so many surrounding us. So I was already started working in this process when I saw the call, and I thought, one of the things about Colorado for me was looking at the sky, that the sky here is so vivid and bright. And I would send my mom pictures of the sky. She's in Eastern Europe, and she would be like, she only see the skies through my pictures. She doesn't care about other parts of nature. She's just like, oh my god, the sky is such a, like spacey here. And so I thought, just the vastness and the sun, there's so much sun and so much light here, will really transfer like the way I feel when I go outside here through this process. And of course, it's hiking, right? So beautiful nature. So I started collecting these artifacts and scanning them. And again, you can use a negative to do the exposure. So it's another process instead of just putting the object itself, because you can see the details within each of those. And yeah, and then I just kind of, and so if you look closer, each of these pieces were not just exposed and processed as a cyanotype piece, but they also laser etched and laser cut. So there's tiny, so the laser, I mean, the technical process of this whole thing is like so multi-step, and I don't want to take the time about talking about this. The point is, like, the laser etchings demonstrate sort of like my meandering around the landscape, and I do a lot of work about topography and topology and in terms of mapping the landscape. So I would record my maps of meandering for GPS tracking, and some of them are, I mean, all of them are embedded here, and some of them are just sort of secondary depiction of the objects, and they not directly etched on the object, on the centerpieces, they kind of offset, and that's the idea of shadow and movement of the wind. So if you look close at some of them, like here, there's an offset, and it's also sort of to create the movement instead of having a static part in the object. Yeah. So
and I do encourage you to get up close and look, because that etching is almost like gold. Like it's just this golden kind of thread. It feels like to me that it's so beautiful and delicate.
Yes, and there was a whole idea just not to overload to keep the blues, variety of different blues. And of course the frames. This is my favorite part. I work with a local framer. I was the one who actually got, I got this beetle kill from a local person, purchased for something else, and I was like, this would be perfect because it's addressing, a lot of my work is locally sourced or locally, like supporting local businesses, or kind of reaching out. So the paper is archival. I had some of this paper from a really long time ago. Somebody gave it to me from the 70s, but I had to find something similar to have it offset. And the local framer, Dave, he was incredible. He worked with me. I wanted to preserve the imperfections, like the beetle tunnels that they made, to make sure, so you can see in some of them. And he did this magical thing where we used 3 slabs and made 9 frames out of it. It was incredible. And he was so thorough about talking about, I didn't want the color to be changed too much when we seal it. So it's all water-based, so it doesn't change. I mean, it's really, the last part for me was more kind of intense than everything. Because, as an artist, when you keep going working on the project, in the end, you're like, okay, I'm done, So let it put on the side and let it rest. The frames were I literally keep looking at them, and it's such an incredible, they really work with the artwork itself. So thank you, Dave. I hope you can hear me.
We do need to start moving on to
I'm sorry.
No.
There's going to be questions.
Well,
yeah.
I encourage you to stay after the talks. One thing speaking of Dave and the framing process, he was telling me that some of the wood wasn't dry yet, some of it was
We found one beetle. He found one live beetle in the wood.
Yeah, he said there was a larvae or something that emerged at one point as the wood continued to.
Yeah, I keep thinking maybe there is. So, but it's all dry now, and all the hitchhikers are out. I mean, there was at least one. So this poor guy, he took him outside, and so let him be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. To get things started, I would like to welcome Mike Pach to come up and talk a little bit about his piece that I'm standing in front of here. And every artist is going to be asked the same question. And please also flag me if we're not loud enough. Just let us know. So, Mike, in 25 words or less, what is your artist statement?
Am I gonna get penalized for more than 25
You are,
words?
I'm not counting. Nobody, I mean, someone might be counting, but it's not me.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I'm a recovering engineer. I am a photographer. I teach photography classes, and I do astrophotography workshops, and I also am an event photographer. And I am the proud author of Colorado Springs Then Now, and I brought a copy with me today so that if you want to take a look at it. I want to give a big shout out to Joy and to Lene for recognizing the impact of this amazing project. And I've been wanting to do something like this since its conception, so dream come true, thank you for that. And I also want to thank the students who worked so hard to make all these prints and put them on the wall. I don't know how you got everything straight and square. If I had done this, it would be like listing to the right. So thank you for that. I think that was a lot more than.
No, that was great. So Mike, please tell us more about Same Tree, Different Day.
Same Tree, Different Day. The title is a positive play on the old saying, same bleep, different day. I photographed this tree that's in Jackson Park. It's behind my condo. I'm the only person in the world that has this view of the tree, and all the photos were taken from my backyard, from the same spot in my backyard. So my main goal when I started out was to create a unique picture every day for a year of the same subject from the same vantage point. And I'm happy to say that I was successful at doing that. But the project turned out to be a whole lot more. There were so many things that I learned, and there's a very strong mental health part of this project, and that being that I'm a person with lived experience, meaning that I deal with depression and anxiety and have since high school. And this was during a time when things weren't so great for me. And there were days that the only thing that I felt like doing or could do was take a picture of my tree and post it on my blog. And so I realized that having a daily goal was something that is very beneficial to those who deal with mental health issues. And some of those goals can be very simple, but my daily goal was taking a picture of the tree and putting it on my blog. So the one of the things I like the most about this project was that I didn't plan it. This picture here, this black and white picture of the tree in the snow, that's actually the very first one I took. And I was on a lunch break, working from home, in my kitchen, making a sandwich, and I looked out my patio door and saw the tree was really cool looking with all the snow and ice on it. And I went outside and took a picture. And then later that afternoon, after I clocked out, the idea came to me, why don't I try to do this for a whole year and see what happens? And a lot of people have ideas like this, and they talk themselves out of it because they, oh, I'll never do that, or that's too hard, or they can make up any excuses they want to not follow through. But I decided to follow through with it. And the journey for an entire year was quite fascinating. And I have so many stories to tell, I could take up a lot more than 10 minutes. So, and then there's also a goal-setting aspect. So the process I used for keeping track of my progress utilized a yearly calendar, and every day I met my goal, I put an X on that date. And the more X's I saw, the more enthused I got about it, the more motivated I got. And it just worked out quite amazingly, I think. And one of my proudest moments is that I spoke at the Canadian Mental Health Association conference in Toronto in 2019. And that day, so many really crazy things happened to me that I just thought, wow, you know, just because I decided to take a picture of this tree, I'm in Canada right now talking about it. So it was really a great moment for me. And this is also a very great moment for me as well. So.
Mike, you pointed out your first photo of the
Yeah.
year. I'm really hoping that I did this correctly, and you could point out the last photo of this project.
The last photo is actually right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
The one where I held up the sign that says I did it. So there's an interesting story behind that. I was talking to somebody about how challenging it was to get a unique photo when there weren't any clouds in the sky. And then they said, why don't you make your own clouds? So like, that's brilliant. So I had these big sheets of white paper and I cut them out into cloud shapes. And I taped them to dowel rods. And I had them at the ready, but didn't need them. And then on the very last day, I decided to write my inspirational message there and take a self-portrait. So also, the picture next to it, for some reason, everybody I talked to at the reception pointed that out and asked me about that picture. And I thought, of all the pictures on the wall, so I had to bring my friend Reginald to introduce him to you. So if you'd like to meet Reginald, he'll stick around and talk to you later.
Yes. Was that the impetus for the writing of your book about a moment in time, and then as time passes, what it looks like in the future?
Actually, the book had absolutely nothing to do with this project, so, other than the fact that I seem to do better with my mental health when I have a project to work on. So if I have something that makes me determined to work and continue working, then, because that was another big project that took me 2 years. So this took 1 year, that took 2 years. So that's 3 years that I was occupied with some big project.
I think I overheard from the crew, the installation crew, that this is just a portion of those.
This is actually roughly half of the photos. So this is 180 photos, and the first time I saw it was when I came to the reception, and I just did one of these. So when you see a piece of artwork and you do this, that's a good sign. So Lene told me what size they were going to make the prints, and my first thought was, I wonder if that's going to be too small. And then when I saw it, I'm like, oh, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect. So Laura, do you have a question?
I just wanted to say how incredibly impactful it is for all of us that we go like this. And I remember meeting with you quite a while ago.
Right, and I was part of an exhibit at the State College downtown.
Right, and you showed them to me, and it took me a while to wrap my brain around them, to get it.
Right.
And the whimsy as well as the profound side, these two dichotomies.
Yeah, so I added my sense of humor in several of the photos.
And this just works so beautifully. Congratulations.
Thank you. I'll also say that a lot of people, when they first are introduced to the project, they see a tree changing throughout a year, but that's just the surface.
Right.
There's so much more. It's a very deep, meaningful project. And one of the things that I point out when I lecture about this is I actually took measurements. I used math. You can tell your kids and grandkids that, that math you learn in school comes in handy. I took measurements and I figured out how big the space was. And if you look at all the photos, that's quite outstanding. All of these amazing things that happen in this very small space. And there's also a very strong tie to mindfulness. So paying attention, these are all things that we normally miss because we're busy going about our days. And so I'm beginning to do workshops on mindfulness as well. And that's something that I'd wanting to transition into with my teaching, because anybody can teach you how to operate a camera, but to add this extra dimension to your work is something that I want to pass on to other people. Thank you.
And I love this notion of daily practice, and we have so many artists in the room as well as people across all disciplines, and I think we can all also relate to not only how beneficial it is for our mental health and our ability to be productive, to establish a daily routine, but also I think it's really common to look at a brilliant artist or a brilliant artwork and think, oh my gosh, this person is a genius, and what you don't see is the same bleep, different day, every day, in and out of the studio, putting the work into the practice. So I think this is also a beautiful demonstration of that. I am delighted to introduce Bob Marsh, who I'm maybe a little embarrassed to say, but this is one of the, for me, incredible outcomes of this project is I never met Bob before he submitted an application, a proposal for this particular collaborative group exhibition. And boy, was it a delight to meet Bob. And so thank you also to Sean for collaborating and encouraging around this. Bob, in 25 words or less, what is your artist statement?
Well, I would repeat the artist statement that I wrote, which is, I have been invading space with motion, sound, lines, colors, shapes, ideas, since, well, May 23rd, 1944. That's less than 25 words.
I mean, that was beautiful. That was beautiful, 25 words or less. Please continue.
What's interesting is here's an invented instrument here, and I make things. I make lots of different kinds of things, like motions and sounds, but also things, shapes, sculptures, drawings, paintings, dances, performances, etc. Installations. There's a very large installation in Pueblo, which is 110 feet long and 11 feet high, and it's all silver, known as silver part. But the first thing that I can remember making, which I didn't know I was inventing an instrument because I was 4 or 5 years old. And the instrument only had one note, and I made a song which only had one word. And it was a shamanic kind of thing, and I didn't know what a shaman was, but there was this big empty lot that kids used to play and dig big holes and forts and it was not a playground, it was just a ground that we played in, right? And my grandmother lived on one side of it, and across the lot was this fence, and kind of funny old house, and a really funny old lady who lived there, Mrs. Getzendenner Wonderland. And she wore like fur coats in the summertime. And anyhow, they had a chow dog in the backyard, and it was for a 4-year-old kid, you know. Chow dog looked like a lion, you know, some kind of. And he was supposedly fierce. You couldn't really go over to the fence, and you know, you didn't want to be close to him. And he was there on the fence looking at me across this lot, and there was a depression, not quite a hole, and I took one stick and laid it across there, and 2 other sticks, and crouched down, which I can't do anymore, and with one note, and singing this song, chow 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 chow. And I don't know how long it went. It was one of those moments that lasts like forever, right? And the memory of it is so clear to me today, you know, and I can't remember much anything else. I mean, I do remember going to school, which was horrible. And so I lost all of that innocence, that just thing to sit down and to do something. And because I learned you had to do it this way, and you had to do things that way, and you had to do this way, and you had to think this way, and you had to walk this way, and I don't know what, you had to dance this way, everything you had to do was that way. And it kind of ruined me. And by the time I was maybe out of high school, I was pretty ruined, and I was a mess, total mess. I was suicidal, and the only things that connected me to the world were my 6 guitar strings. And fortunately, guitar strings are really, really strong. They can really hold a lot of weight, and it was really a terrible time. And when I wound up at one point in Music Theory 0100 at Wayne State University, they said, well, this is sight singing. I said, I can't sing. And then they said, and the teacher said to me, well, how do you communicate with people? And I said, by playing the guitar. And I was supposed to say by talking, you know. And then he says, then he's supposed to say, well, anybody who can talk can sing. Yeah. But I cut him short there, and he didn't know what to say then. And it was true. That was the only connection I had with the world was through the guitar. And also, then I was in the art department making carvings. I carved all night long in my parents' basement, drove them crazy because they would chop, 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 chop. But I had to wait until the big light bulb in the sky was up, and then I could go to sleep. But I couldn't sleep at night. I was in terrible shape. So music and art saved my life, really. They kept me through. But I mean, I was filled with self-hatred, and I fueled that with alcohol. And later on, after I became sober, I worked with a little girl, 6 years old, in residential treatment. She was horribly abused at home. She said one day, just out of nowhere, I hate myself so much I don't want to see me around anymore. And I said, exactly, I know exactly what you mean, because that's what I did with alcohol. I didn't see me around anymore. I was an oblivion pot smoker. Nitrous oxide was great because it was gone so fast. So anyhow, I was in suicide on the temporary basis. And, I did miss killing myself a few times while driving while drunk and just driving while stupid, whatever. Anyhow, I didn't intend to go into this, really. But I was able to recover from the addictions to alcohol and other things. And I gathered, after sober for a year, I gathered all my stuff in a studio in Midtown Detroit. It was oddly enough it was a big warehouse, and it was run by the Detroit Police Benevolent and Protective Society. And the thing was overseen by a retired policeman, and it was filled with artists, anarchists, artists, I mean, and it was illegal to live there, but everybody lived there. So that was where I tried to get this thread, and I quit the family business and started working repairing guitars at a music store, and I made my second invented instrument then. I had a box full of guitar strings, 6 violin tuning pins, and a wooden box, and I drilled a hole, but I made the 6-string chanteur, 3 minutes, okay. Anyhow, So that began the thing. I began to carve wood. I filled it with musical instruments and carving and this and that. Made more instruments as time went on. Made more carvings, etc., etc. And that has ended up here. So this is the most recent instrument. It comes out of the. This is sort of a portable sound garden. I made a large public instrument in Detroit, 150-bar xylophone to celebrate Michigan's sesquicentennial. It was downtown in Hart Plaza, and playable by up to 60 people at once. And I was unable to tune it to the 3 pentatonic octaves I had. It was 10, 15-bar units. And it was randomly tuned, and people were playing it, and the sound was so natural, like the birds chirping in the forest. And so I continued on, and I had many of these pieces hanging from a tent frame. And then a couple years ago, I installed them in trees in Mineral Palace Park just for a day. So then I began to, somebody had left this shopping cart in the at my installation, Silver Park. It was there for 6 months, so I decided to take it home, and I thought, well, I can put a lot of these things here and assemble them, and cast aluminum was great. These happen to be bowls from China. I don't know how old they are. Anyway, so yeah. And here it is today, a portable sound garden.
Would you perform it for us for a moment?
Sure.
Would you, and maybe would you like to improvise a shamanic chant that we can join in?
Doing chow-chows.
Do ye hum soya hey yo 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 hum soya.
Unlike Bob, Sean is an artist who is, I think, quite possibly one of, if not the first artist that I met upon moving back to Colorado Springs, because one of my very first projects that I worked on right when I was hired at the Fine Arts Center was, Sean was around working on an exhibition called Danger Toy Love Gun, and I met Sean at that time, and I thought, boy, this guy's really a nut, but how great of a nut is Sean O'Mealy? And those of you who know Sean, I think will agree. Bob agrees. And so Sean has become an advocate and supporter and just tremendous force, and really is a leader in our creative community. So, as we welcome Sean O'Mealy, in 25 words or less, what is your artist statement?
I've forgotten my artist statement. But I have fun, and I play with things. And my mind is a friendly, sometimes terrifying, but friendly, playful, safe place for me. As many artists may know, this the brain and the mind and the psyche of someone who is going to be an artist is something sometimes very fragile, but it's so deeply important that the individual find a place within themselves that they're happy to be. This is sanctuary. And I would spend a lot of time alone in the woods, in the mud, under bushes, or climbing trees as a child. I was the oldest of 5 kids in New Orleans, where I grew up, which is right downstream from here, and downhill from here, and out toward the big oceans. I don't have a opening statement, but I'm just going to continue on. Shall I
Continue on, John.
So, I have a background in toy invention. I have done some teaching here on campus, teaching art here by invitation, because I have no degrees. I'm largely self-taught. I learned things as I went along. And I also I have 5 children. My wife over here. I have 3 children and grandchildren. The time spent inventing toys was delightful because I would go to New York every year at Toy Fair and explore the new toy lines. I was in a partnership inventing toy concepts.
Sean, can I just ask you a question really quick?
Let's do that.
No, I want you to continue. Before you move on, you invented what is probably my most favorite toy of all time. And I would like you to tell this group what it is. You know what it is.
He's like, which one?
Your body? I don't know what you're talking about, but
the pole.
Oh, there are several. There's the shark fin pull toy.
Yeah.
There is the dog, the puppy dog from
Oh my gosh!
That you pull and its tail waves?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, okay. Thanks. Back in touch with reality now. Yeah, that was a wonderful gig, and got me to Sweden a couple of times to work with the Brio Toy Company there. I was working with a guy who was sort of the Geppetto of that company when Brio used to only make wooden toys. Working in the toy business was delightful. It was fun. I learned a lot. I learned that the toy business was not for kids, but it also got me thinking about how things go together, how I can engineer some things, how things could be engineered, how could be manufactured and things, and what stimulates response in a viewer. So, until I had structure like that, I was an artist who just wandered through his brain, through the woods, and found things of curiosity and satisfaction, that sort of thing. So, working in the toy business made me realize how stimulating line, shape, color, and pattern are, and how to then use that, apply that in specific ways. So this piece kind of grew from a rough little sketch that I showed Joy, and it's changed quite a bit. I know we were supposed to collaborate. This is collaboratorium,
however, yeah, it was not a requirement. It was just a suggestion.
Yes. So I was thinking at one point, I had the idea to use a lot of found doors and objects, and I was going to tag them with rainbows motifs, so it's with a spray paint thing. Then I thought, well, what if I painted out the door, got the doors, painted them all white, and then enlisted other people to do the tagging. And I thought, well, that would be lovely. And then I just realized that would be a management nightmare. It would take so much time.
Yeah, managing many different artists on one project is really hard.
Just a little. So, but Joy has given all of us some freedoms to go with that I really do appreciate. So, and it didn't require that I collaborate with other people specifically. I find that's very challenging to do. And I hit on this idea that evolved from that drawing to take this graphic approach to signify various groups of people, let's say, and stick it on a door or a portal of some kind. So these are drawer fronts and doors and windows and things like that. And then I just kind of played with it. So play is extremely important to me. I was thinking about this wonderful space. This is wonderfully sited here, thank you. And this, I came and measured the floor to ceiling, and went to town with this. And I think one of the things that by not incorporating all these various people, children, grown-ups, old people, to kind of paint in any fashion they'd like to, or use markers to create the color, and use a symbol of rainbows and things like that, I think this ended up being a better artwork, so I really appreciate doing that. It's a different artwork, maybe not better, but this feels really good. Before it was called Where the Sky, this was called, there's something to build upon or respond to Starr Kempf's work. And we've lived in town a long time, and I've chatted with Starr Kempf and visited his property. And it was just such a delight to walk into this garden of these silvery, steampunky, I don't think he would have used that term, but these sort of Nautilus, Jules Verne kind of creatures growing like plants in his yard. And there'd be always new plants going up all the time. But one of the things that was consistent that I thought was very interesting was the silver paint. And I was thinking, and that's fascinated me for a long time, this silver paint really is an industrial, thick stuff you can paint on. And how it reflects the sky. So Starr Kempf's pieces are up in the sky. You know, you can kind of lose sight of them. When the light's just right, they kind of disappear into the sky. And the diffusion of objects has been sort of a theme in contemporary art. And I thought of Bob Marsh, because Bob Marsh has this wonderful installation using this similar silver paint. And I said, oh, he's a natural, I'll just bring him in. Of course, now I know Bob more as a performance artist. He's a walking artful soul, and very, very kind. And he was willing to do this collaboration. But this really changed from that. And I don't know, rainbows, sky, hope, you know, around the planet. Although somebody told me dogs don't see rainbows, I'm thinking, oh, maybe.
Dogs are rainbows.
They are rainbows. Well, anyway, that's I talked way longer than I thought. Thank you for coming.
Sean's work is so delightful. I always take such delight in Sean's work. And this piece is certainly no exception. And although Sean does occasionally make work that looks like candy, I think that this is also a reflection of that Sean's work is not candy. It is not just sweetness for the eye and joy bringing, but there's always so much thought and depth and philosophy that goes into the creation of this work. So thank you, Sean. And I love the title of this piece too. It makes me laugh every time. It is called Prism Tattoo. It makes me laugh. So as we settle in for the end of our artist talks, not just today, but all of our artist talks for We Are the Sky. Again, thank you for supporting the show and being here with us today. I am kind of taking off from where Sean said collaboration can be really hard. And some artists love collaboration and some artists don't love collaboration, and both are wonderful approaches to art making. But when we posted the call for entries, so my dear friend Margaret Kasahara, who I've also known for many, many years, and many of you are probably familiar with Margaret's work, we talked a little bit about the proposal, and I won't tell you about the project, just that it was so exciting to meet another new-to-me artist, Heidi Almosara, who these two artists did not know each other before they started collaborating on this project. And so we're closing out with what I think is, you'll experience many of the works in the show as figurative or, thematic in different ways. Certainly this work is very conceptual and abstract in many ways. But we're ending on a pretty profound note here. So it's my honor to introduce Margaret and Heidi, and starting with Margaret, in 25 words or less, what is your artist statement?
Well, because I'm a good student, I had to write it down. And I'm writing it out just because.
I'm gonna give you this.
Otherwise,
I know you don't want it.
Otherwise, I would just be meandering on this. My work is an expression of identity. I am inspired by everyday life, from its familiar routines to the remarkable moments that life brings. And one of those remarkable moments was opening up my email and seeing the invitation from Joy to participate in this show. I immediately said yes, of course, and started thinking about what I wanted to do. And I thought I wanted to do an installation, and I wanted to do an installation using my late mother's Mitsumata branches that she had collected over 40 plus years as an ikebana artist. And for those of you who don't know, ikebana is the Japanese art of flower arranging. And I wanted to use them not only to honor her, but also because they kind of evoked Starr Kempf's work for me. Each of these branches are kind of narrow and tall. And I was thinking about hanging them from the ceiling and maybe putting them at different levels. So then they would have that verticality that I think of with Starr Kempf's work as well. I thought I would have these kind of like arms reaching down, trying to make connection. But I didn't know quite what they would be reaching down for at this time. And then there was a meeting with Joy, and I found out a couple of things. The first was that this wasn't an invitational per se, that we all had to put in a proposal. And the second thing was that it was to be a collaboration. And so I, didn't know what I was going to do. And she also preferably wanted somebody who would be from a different discipline. So say an engineer or a musician or a dancer, or maybe even a culinary artist. So I thought, what am I going to do? So I had to think about it for a while. And while I was pondering it, I was like, well, what am I going to have these branches? So I'm still thinking about these hanging branches and what are they reaching for? So I thought, well, maybe they're reaching for gravel or water, or maybe something more organic, like leaves just kind of strewn about. And so they're, these are bare branches, maybe they're reaching for their leaves. Or I thought maybe some flower petals. And then I thought maybe flowers. Flowers. And that's when the light bulb went off, and I said, I want to collaborate with an ikebana artist. But I didn't know any ikebana artists from the Pikes Peak region, so I contacted Kimiko Kuno, who is the director of Sozuketsu, Colorado, excuse me. And I had worked with Kimiko on distributing my late mother's materials. She had hundreds of books and catalogs and lots of materials and almost 100 containers. And so we kind of distributed them, donated them. And at the time, she was really good to also have visited a solo show that I had in Denver, where I did a, I'll call it an enzo, or a kind of river of life to, in memoriam for both my mom and my father who passed that year. So, so she kind of knew what I would be wanting from a collaborator, since this was created out of, I call it corkscrew willow. And so it was kind of an interlocked corkscrew willow ring. So I asked her for recommendations, and she sent back Heidi, Almosara's name, and I immediately Googled her, and I mean, I find out not only is she this amazing ikebana artist, but a visual artist as well. Just some very beautiful drawings and mixed media pieces, and you do your own cast concrete, and so I thought she would be perfect. And so I think we met maybe 3-4 times after you said yes, and we didn't really start to build on it until we were in the space, because of the way ikebana works and just the creation of this. There were some technical issues as to why I couldn't do the hanging branches like I had originally thought, but by actually tying them together, literally tying them together, I thought that really emphasized that more metaphorical idea of connection. Because I mean, they're actually connected and tied together. And so that reflects that thought of how we're all connected to each other and also to nature. So thank you so much, Heidi, for joining me on this adventure and for trusting the process and for trusting me.
So, Heidi, 25 words or less.
In 25 words or less, I am a multidisciplinary artist whose focus is on ikebana, the Japanese art of flower arranging. Yeah, so I got an email out of the blue from my sensei Kimiko Kuno, and she was like, told me about this project that Margaret wanted to work on, and I had just had a baby, so I didn't have much time, but I have time for what matters. And so when I got this email, Margaret wanted to collaborate with a Sogetsu Ikebana artist, which is a specific school of Ikebana. There were over 3,000. She wanted to hopefully collaborate with someone who was a fine artist. I was a former fine arts professor for almost 15 years, so big into the art world. And even though my time is limited, I just thought, wow, like, what an awesome opportunity. Like, I've never met Margaret. She wants to collaborate with an Ikebana artist who's also a fine artist. And she has this vision to make this project. And I have no idea what she's talking about, but I am in. Yeah, so like, it was really cool to receive this email and just be like, hey, let me just meet up with this stranger. Let's like talk art. Let's talk about branches. Let's talk about ikebana. Let's just like bond hard. And we did, like, it was really natural. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't like, there was no tension. There was no like, let's not do that or anything. It just flowed really well. It was really natural. It was really an organic collaboration, which is really beautiful. Once we got into this space, bringing the piece together was just really exciting from the beginning to the end. And so to kind of take you through some of the highlights, you know, Margaret, she brings in all these branches and they're just beautiful and it's just laid out, right? And I think the quietude that came with the piece as we figured out literally like where each branch should go. One branch was like laid down and then we were like, and then we'd walk around like, you know? So really into it, really hard artists, but we were both on the same page, trying to find where the branches lay, where the balance should be. And then the meditation and kind of methodical quality of tying the knots and the aestheticness of them kind of coming down. The strings was all part of the piece, all part of the kind of the visual presentation of it. And the real exciting part is when it finally got hung, right? Because we're like, should it be flat? Is it going to be a square? But two corners got hung, and then there was this moment where this corner over here is being raised, and we're like, wait a minute. Stop. Look at that.
I know, it's funny, because you're
Yeah.
like, get off the level.
Yeah, we're like, it should be level. Yeah.
But then that
and
was trapped, and you're like, no.
And then it's like dipping here, like, oh my gosh, it's alive. But yeah, like it was, you know, like it was a moment, you know, oh, like it was just like, there it is, you know, and yeah, and so then it like, we had it kind of skewed, and then we had it dipping down, and then, you know, everything was very, very methodical, like this space, then, you know, like how much should this space be? Yeah, how much is the visual tension right here with this flower?
And I loved your cart of possibilities.
Yeah, and so we had, it was very, we didn't know what the final piece was going to look like until literally the very end. And so then, yeah, I rolled in a card of possibilities, as I called it.
All of these dry flowers.
Yeah, for like the floor piece, you know, is it going to be gravel? Is it going to be rocks? Are we going to have three flowers? Are we going to have one flower? Like, what goes with it? And I think that's part of the beauty about Ikebana, is that there's a lot of thought put into it, and a lot of simplicity, and things are very methodical, and that's how this whole piece kind of came to be. And so this one flower here kind of reaching up, this stem, and then this here, like this line. When this all came together, we circled the piece, we walked around, and we were like, there it is. And then we just like sat with it, you know, like they're installing, you know, over, 180 plus photos over here. They're like, working hard, and then lots of things are being installed, and we're just like, I think this is it. Yeah, so it was a beautiful collaboration to do with Margaret. I feel thankful that I got that email, and I'm thankful now that we're friends.
Yeah.
It was awesome and a beautiful place to wrap up. We are very, very close to our hour. I would really like to acknowledge, as Margaret and Heidi were talking about, we're working hard, and that grid that Mike recognized as how did that happen in such a beautiful way, Sean's gorgeous sighting and the way this piece came together. You know, the work with the artists, I really just want to acknowledge my colleague, Renee Bowman-Cravens, who is the Exhibitions and Events Manager here at GOCA. And yes, please let's all clap for her. Who is just so, as an artist herself, just so skilled at understanding a vision and bringing it to fruition and supporting the work along the way. So. We are just right here about at 1 o'clock, and I want to respect your Saturday afternoon time. So let's just all thank our artists and remind you that if you have questions for them, you know, I think everyone's willing to stick around for just a little bit here. If you've got questions, please ask them directly. And again, lots of events related to this exhibition still in September, big closing party October 5th. And thanks to you all for being here. So thank you to our artists. And happy Labor Day weekend.